He kicked her in front of everyone, then found out she secretly owned the company his father worked for. Tommy didn't even hesitate. One second the cleaner was wiping the floor, the next, she was on the ground, clutching her side. A stunned silence fell across the lobby of Apex Towers. Not because people didn't want to help, but because everyone knew who Tommy was. The son of Chief Aiken Whale, the company's de facto king. And in his mind, that made him untouchable. He stood over the old woman, his expensive shoes dripping with arrogance. "You, this useless woman, are you blind? Do you know how much the shirt costs?" It wasn't even a full splash, just a flick of water from her rag. But Tommy acted like it was acid. His voice echoed, full of disgust. Security glanced at each other, unsure. The receptionist looked like she wanted to cry, but said nothing. Everyone was watching, frozen by fear. The old woman, her name was Mimar Grace, tried to rise. Her hands trembled, her waist ached, but she didn't scream. She just looked up at him and said, "Ah, my son. You kicked me," Tommy sneered. "Next time, I'll use a cane." And with that, he walked off, laughing with his friends. But what he didn't know, what nobody in that lobby knew, was that the woman he just kicked wasn't who she appeared to be. The elevator dinged, but no one moved. Even as Tommy disappeared into the lift, dragging his perfume trail and overfed ego, all eyes stayed on Mimar Grace. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just sat there, breathing in pain, her hand pressing gently against her side. For most people, the moment would have ended there, another forgotten humiliation buried beneath silence. But not this time. Mimar Grace rose, slow but steady. Her wrapper was soaked, her blouse clung to her back. But her eyes, they had changed. No longer soft, no longer ignored. She picked up her mop, her bucket, her rag, and walked, not to the cleaner's room, but to the golden elevator. The one that led to the top floor, 18th floor, the boardroom. As the doors closed around her, she stared into the mirror and whispered, "Enough." She hadn't stepped into that room in over 10 years. For a decade, she watched the company she built turned into a playground for egos. And today, because of one spoiled boy's flying kick, the sleeping lioness had been stirred. Upstairs, the board was deep in discussion, sipping coffee, planning billions. They had no idea who was coming, or what storm she carried in her silence. "Excuse me, sirs," the security guard said, stepping into the sleek glass boardroom. His voice cracked. "Someone's here to see you, Madam Grace." At first, there was confusion. A few directors exchanged puzzled glances. Then one elderly board member froze. "You mean Madam Grace Oli?" Silence dropped like a bomb. The name wasn't just familiar, it was legendary. The original founder of Apex Towers, the woman whose brilliance had built the empire brick by brick. "That can't be," one whispered. "She vanished 10 years ago." But then the doors opened and there she was. The cleaner they passed every morning without a word. The old woman they thought was background noise. But now, she wasn't pushing a mop. She walked in like a general who had returned from exile. Her steps were slow, but her presence was louder than thunder. She didn't greet anyone. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the head of the table and looked Chief Aiken Whale dead in the eyes. "Get up from my chair," she said. He blinked, confused. "Madam, maybe you're mistaken. You're not well." But her voice didn't shake. 10 years ago, I gave you power. Today, I'm taking it back." And then, she dropped the brown envelope on the table. The truth inside was about to burn the room to ashes. A board member tore open the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were documents original, signed, sealed, ownership papers, share distribution, control rights. And at the bottom of every page, the same name, Grace Oli. "She still owns 62%. The man gasped. "She never transferred control, only day-to-day operations." The room exploded with whispers. Chief Aiken-Whale stood frozen, his pride leaking like sweat down his neck. "Madam, please," he finally muttered. "Let's talk." But her eyes didn't blink. "Talk? You've been talking for 10 years, while I cleaned the floor of the empire I built, while your son, the one you raised, like a spoiled goat, spat on my legacy." The silence in the room grew thick. "You allowed him to treat people like ants. You turned him into a god. Now his pride has brought fire to your doorstep." She pointed at the table. "From today, I resume full control of Apex Towers. And my first act as board chair." She turned to Chief Aiken-Whale. "You are hereby removed as managing director, effective immediately." Gasps sliced through the air. He staggered into his chair, whispering her name like a curse. But it was too late. The lioness had returned, and the jungle would be rearranged. By afternoon, the news hit the internet like lightning. Cleaner turns out to be billionaire owner fires, CEO on the spot. Twitter caught fire. Instagram exploded with memes. Videos leaked from the lobby, shaky footage of Tommy, shouting, kicking, humiliating the old woman. The same woman who now ran the company. Comments piled in like a tidal wave. He kicked his destiny. From big boy to beggar. "Madam Grace, we stan." And just like that, the untouchable family name, Aiken-Whale, turned to ash. Emails were sent. Internal memos circulated. Effective immediately. Chief Aiken-Whale has stepped down due to internal restructuring. All communications will now go through Madam Grace, Oli, founder and chair. By evening, Tommy was nowhere to be found. His friends? Silent. His Instagram? Dead. His pride? Shattered. And as for his father? Well, the banks had already started freezing accounts. Government agencies came knocking. Deals were reviewed. Cars were seized. Properties in Banana Island, once symbols of untouchable power, now had yellow caution tape on their gates. But the most painful loss wasn't material. It was status. Respect. Fear. The very pillars of Chief Aiken-Whale's empire were crumbling. And at the center of the earthquake was a woman in a wrapper. 3 days later, Tommy stood in his father's now empty office. No leather chairs, no marble desk, no glass trophy case, just a plastic chair and cold silence. Chief Aiken-Whale sat alone, staring into space like a man already buried. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, I didn't know she owned the company." His father didn't look at him. "Don't speak." The air was dead. Then, slowly, Chief Aiken-Whale turned his head, eyes red. "Do you know how hard I worked for this name? How many enemies I silenced? How much blood I buried beneath the concrete of this empire?" His voice cracked. "And you, with one kick, one foolish kick, you burned it all." Tommy's hands trembled. "I said I'm sorry." "You're not sorry," his father snapped. "You're hungry." He stood up slowly. "From today, you are on your own. No house, no cars, no accounts, no friends. You made me lose everything. Now carry the burden yourself." That was the last time Tommy saw him. No hug, no forgiveness, just cold dismissal. That night, Tommy left with one phone, one shirt, and no plan. And when he reached out to his so-called friends, they vanished like vapor. Bayo had no space. Femi blue-ticked and blocked. Even the girls who once called him Zaddy now reposted memes mocking his fall. By the end of the week, Tommy was sleeping on bare concrete, his pride soaked in rain. Morning came like punishment. Tommy woke up in a half-finished shop in Agege, no mattress, just bare cement and a rat chewing plastic nearby. His stomach grumbled like thunder. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. No one cared. No one remembered his designer shoes, his champagne selfies, or his Gucci shades. The world had moved on, and now even the sun looked down on him like a stranger. He wandered the street until he saw them laborers, pushing wheelbarrows, hauling sand, mixing cement with hands blistered from survival. He paused, then swallowed his pride. "Oga, I fit work?" The site foreman laughed. "You? Nah, you go carry cement? You way resemble billboard model?" Tommy didn't flinch. I no get choice, sir. And that was how the billionaire's son became a bricklayer. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, washed his face with sachet water, and joined the other boys. He carried cement bags heavier than his past life. His once smooth palms turned to sandpaper. His back ached. His legs buckled. The boys laughed. Almost he downgrade from Benz to block. But Tommy didn't reply. He had no strength left to defend pride. Just sweat, hunger, and shame. At night, he stared at the stars and whispered to himself, "How did I get here?" But rock bottom wasn't the end. Not yet. Because when you think he's lost it all, hunger drives him to a decision that changes everything. It started with whispers, quiet conversations in the corners of construction sites, boys with scars and eyes too old for their age. One of them leaned close one night and said, "Guy, you still dey carry cement? You know, serious." Tommy was too tired to argue. He just asked, "Wettin, you mean?" The boy smiled without warmth. "There's money out there, real money. Just wear black, move silent, and don't ask questions." That was how it began. Hunger numbs, fear, and shame. Shame had already packed its bags. So Tommy joined them. The late-night rides in unregistered cars. The masks. The heavy silence before doors were kicked open. He never carried a gun at first, just stood watch. But even that changed. Because when you dive deep enough into darkness, it stops feeling like water. One night, everything went wrong. They hit a house in Surulere. The plan was simple. Get in, get out. But something about the compound felt off. The lights were on, but no one answered the knock. The door wasn't locked. They entered quiet, fast, until Tommy froze. In the middle of the sitting room was a portrait, faded but familiar. A woman in a wrapper, eyes ancient, fearless, Mamar Grace. It was her house, and she was standing in the hallway. Not afraid, not surprised, just watching. "So, this is what you've become," she said, and Tommy's soul cracked in half. Tommy's hands shook. The gun slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. "Ma," he whispered. But the words got stuck in his throat. Mamar Grace didn't move. She just stared, her eyes colder than the night air. "I warned you," she said, her voice low. "The day you kicked me, I told you. One day, you will kneel before me." The other boys were confused. Guy, who be this woman? But Tommy already knew. This wasn't just a house. It was her sanctuary, the place she built when the world told her to sit down and stay quiet. And now the same woman he mocked, the same woman he called a cockroach, had caught him with a gun in her hallway. He dropped to his knees. "Please, I swear, I didn't know it was you." She didn't flinch. "You've been blind since the day you were born. Blinded by your father's shadow, your mother's excuses, and your own rotten pride." One of the boys tried to step forward. She raised a phone already dialing. "Move again, and you'll see that even God respects justice." They backed away, but Tommy stayed on the floor, tears pouring down his face. "Please don't call police. I'll die in prison." She looked at him for a long time, then turned around and walked away. Not because she forgave him, but because sometimes the worst punishment is survival. They say when a tree falls in the forest, it makes no sound unless someone's there to hear it. But when Tommy Aiken-Whale fell, the whole world heard it. A once proud son of a billionaire, now sleeping in abandoned kiosks and dodging the ghosts of his own choices. Mamar Grace never pressed charges. She didn't need to. Tommy's name was already mud. His face, once plastered on social media, once bathed in club lights and filtered selfies, now avoided in shame. Nobody remembered the perfume. Nobody cared about the shirts. They only remembered the kick. The moment he chose cruelty over decency, the day he mistook power for purpose, Mamar Grace returned to Apex Towers not as a cleaner, but as a legend. Her story spread far beyond Lagos told, in markets, offices, universities. They called her the Mop Queen. But to her, none of it mattered. She hadn't come for revenge. She came to reclaim what she built and to remind the world that dignity, like truth, always rises. As for Tommy, he still walks the streets sometimes, unshaven, thin, wearing silence like a prison uniform. And whenever he passes a cleaning woman, he looks away because deep down, he knows one kick. That's all it took. One kick that destroyed an empire and woke the lioness sleeping beneath the dust. If that ending gave you chills, share this story, because too many people still think power makes them untouchable.